to read between the lines. Got to read.
Hello everybody, welcome to another edition of What's Going On. I'm your host Tom D'Ambra, and as always we're very thankful you take the time from your busy day to view our program. My friends, I am going to finish this Frankfurt school on this edition, and I'm going to just want to touch on some short things, and I'm going to not try to digress out into other subject matter like I have for the last 2 weeks. But a couple of things I do want to cover. One, we have now had the opportunity to read the transcript. It's called the Ukrainian transcript, and that was the conversation between President Trump and President Zelensky of the Ukraine. Now, this gentleman, Zelensky, is rather interesting. He's sort of a Ronald Reagan type in the sense of how he got into politics and how the people became to know him. He was an entertainer. He was actually a comedian, if you can believe that. But he was so disgusted by what was going on with his country in the Ukraine that he got elected on the platform of being anti-corruption and trying to drain the swamp, if you would. And that's exactly what the transcript brings out. When I was going to read the transcript to you folks, but it would have taken too long. I do ask you to go on the internet and get it and read it for yourself. You will see there is no collusion there. You will see there is no force of hand there from Trump against Zelensky. Basically, my friends, I think Zelensky is actually feeling out President Trump to see if he is genuine in his wanting to drain the swamp and go after the corruption. And I found that very uplifting, because I'm going to get into a little bit about the politics and the geography and the history of Ukraine and why it is such an important matter with regards to what's going on there. But when we do this, my friends, I want to just go over some quick things with you about the Ukraine. The Ukraine, my friends, is geographically the gateway to Europe and Russia. And I just want to do a brief description for you. First of all, the Ukraine is considered part of Europe, and it is geographically the largest country in Europe, and it also is the breadbasket of Europe, which is incredible when you think about the history, how the people were starved with Stalin. Now, the Ukraine, you start out with Crimea down in the south. And then on the left-hand side, you got the Black Sea. On the right side, you got the Sea of Azov. And then as you work your way from the west all the way up to the north is the border of Russia. So from the Sea of Azov on the lower right-hand side, if you would, if you picture a map, all the way up north to where you actually come into Belarus. My friends, that entire border is Russia, okay? And then once you go from Belarus, because you're heading north, when you start turning east, if you would, you run into Poland and Slovakia, Hungary, Romania, and Moldova, okay? And then as that wraps you around on the left-hand side, if you would, on the eastern side, which brings you back down to the East Sea and into Crimea. So understand, this is geographically the gateway, as I said, between Russia and Europe, okay? Now, some real quick history behind it. Crimea was actually part of Russia till 1954. When Khrushchev actually gave it away. And then in 1991, with the post-Soviet breakup, Crimea became an independent state. So Crimea became part of the Ukraine in 1954, and then declared its independence, as did Ukraine, from the Soviet Federation, if you would, because the Soviet Union collapsed. Even though the American bankers and the English bankers put billions and billions of dollars into the Soviet Union with with aid, with infrastructure support, with military support, and so forth. That's right, folks. The arch enemy, that, you know, the evil communists, we put them all in power, every one of them. There's not one that we did not, okay? So the religions part of Ukraine is 75% Orthodox Christianity and 23% Catholic. That's quite a significant amount of that country that's made up. 98% is made up out of Christianity. Then the rest of it is basically, you have pockets of Islam. Okay. So when you break up the Ukraine politically, my friends, it's like the the United States was during the Civil War. Only it's not divided north and south, it's divided east and west. The Donetsk People's Republic is a very strong pro-Russian division, and then on the west side, it's a pro-neo-Nazi division, which is supported by the West. You heard me right, my friends. You heard me right. The eastern side, the Donetsk People's Republic, is a pro-Russian support, and the neo-Nazi on the western side, which is supported with the United States, by the United States, basically this is where all the collusion came through with regards to the Clinton Foundation and the rest of it. Now, in 1941, when the Germans invaded that area, the Soviets, the Russians, they left rather quickly. But remarkably, what they were able to do is, when you read this, it's horrifying. But in 1941, the Soviets retreated, and here's what they did. They went into all their prisons and they killed everybody. Absolute massacred, murdered every single one of them. Most of them were political prisoners. And whenever possible, they evacuated their personnel. But here's the big one. Whenever possible, they dismantled and removed the industrial plants, and basically after that conducted what's called the scorched earth policies. You know, the same policies that Lincoln sent Sherman to go down to the south and burn. Scorched earth policies, okay? Now, the Ukrainian officials on the neo-Nazi side, the west side of the country, which is supported by the United States, the Obama administration, I should clarify, the Ukrainian officials helped Hillary Clinton and undermined Trump by asking questions of his fitness. Remember when the whole thing came out about Trump's fitness? Well, guess what, folks? That developed in the Ukraine. That's when he was a political, he had been elected to office yet, okay? They also, through this, they disseminated and produced documents implementing Trump in different various ideals of corruption. They produced and fabricated the Steele dossier. They funneled millions and millions of dollars in logistical support against Russia and Putin, including, my friends, bringing strong Muslim anti-West fractions into the country of Russia. They helped Clinton's allies research damaging, fabricated information on Trump and his advisors. Now, who was the liaison between all this? It was a woman by the name of Alexandra Chalpula, and she was an attorney for the Democratic National Committee from 2004 to 2016, and I did some research on her. The Democratic National Committee paid her over $412,000. You heard me right, $412,000 during this time period. And with that money, that was her pay. She also was given a budget where she, used investigators, private investigators, government officials, and government intelligence agencies, all from Ukraine to manifest these 5 things that were all fabricated, that has been proven fabricated, to help Hillary Clinton get elected into office. I am very sorry. Now, Sarah Sanders made the comment, if you're looking for an example of a campaign coordinating with a foreign country or a foreign source, look no further than the DNC and the Ukraine. That's not an accusation. That is an on-the-record action that took place. Very interesting, my friends. All this has been fabrication, and all this has been fabricated and done with by the international bankers through the DNC. I've been doing some research on medical debt in this country, and I'll listen to this. The United States has the highest medical debt ratio in the entire world. I'll say that again. Per capita, the United States spends more on health care than any other country in the world, and has the highest debt and medical expenses than any other country in the world. And think about this, my friends. Think about this. We not only have the highest debt and the highest expense, and we spend the most on our health care, but in the entire world, we have the highest cancer rates, as I said, in the entire world. In the Western industrialized world, we have the highest child mortality rates in the entire Western industrial world. Okay? People, the total debt right now that is owed in the medical field is $81 million. 42.9 million of that is unpaid medical debt of people who have insurance. Think of that. The baby boomers owe 80.9% of their population is in medical debt. Generation X is 79.9% of their demographics of population is in medical debt. And for the millennials, which makes no sense to me, it's the highest because they're the youngest, is 81.5% of their demographics are in debt to the medical industry. 63% of them three demographics in the United States that are in debt avoid future medical treatment because they can't afford it anymore. And this is just last year, 7% of these demographics had to claim bankruptcy because of medical debt. And as I said, you take all that into account, and we still are the highest cancer rates in the entire world, which is unbelievable, and the highest child mortality rates in the industrialized world. Unbelievable. Just unbelievable. Okay. So where's all this money going? Well, the number one profit margin of all the industries in North America, Canada, United States, is the pharmaceutical companies. They have a profit margin, which I said is the highest of all the industries, of 21% annually. The 11 top drug companies last year in the United States and Canada made a profit of $515 billion. Globally, the pharmaceutical companies made a profit of $1.05 trillion. So in the United States and Canada, the drug companies, pharmaceutical companies, made about 55% of the total global profits in the pharmaceutical industry. Yet, the population of the United States and Canada compared to the global population is 7.1%. And think about this, my friends. You do not have the right to sue the pharmaceutical companies because in 1986, the Vaccine Protection Program was put into place. This is why you sign waivers when in the medical field and they force you to take the influenza shot. And we've read the insert to you. Remember all the different diseases it can cause, including influenza, all the way down to death? So they're not only protected, they get tax breaks. They have the highest profit margin of all the industries in North America. You can see why Americans are in such debt to medical industry. Okay, I hope you all got to see President Trump's speech to the UN. I'm going to be real quick with this, my friends, because we're going to complete the Frankfurt School today. I am not going to go on to other things, but I hope you got to see President Trump's message in their own house. That's what made it such a beautiful thing. In their own house. Talking about what is going on in the world and how the United States will never be a socialist country. Well, I hate to burst that balloon, but we are very, very far off the road from a laissez-faire, common law republic. We are more now of a socialist, government-laden democracy. But President Trump went to their house and put it in their face. And one of the things he talked about big time and spent a lot of time on it was the corruption of the World Trade Organization and things like this. But the whole foundation of his speech was about socialism. And what is socialism? And he did a magnificent job of it. I will tell you, I found it to be very uplifting. Am I happy with everything Trump has done and hasn't done? Absolutely not. I am very happy with a lot of things he has done. Absolutely. But I thought about a quote that I read to you on the show some years ago. And it comes from a book, The Decline and Fall of the Athenian Republic by Alexander Fraser Tytler. It's Tytler. And it just sort of consolidated Mr. Trump's 37-minute speech in this one statement. A democracy cannot exist as a permanent form of government. It can only exist until the voters discover that they can vote themselves largesse from the public treasury. From that moment on, the majority always votes for the candidate promising the most benefits from the public treasury. And with the result that a democracy always collapses over loose fiscal policies, always to be followed by dictatorship and then a monarchy. These nations always progress through the following sequence. Then, and at that sequence we talked about last week. And what I'll just do it real quick. We go from bondage to spiritual faith, from spiritual faith to great courage, from great courage to liberty, from liberty to abundance, from abundance to selfishness, from selfishness to complacency, from complacency to dependency, from dependency back into bondage. And then then when the people go back to bondage from spiritual faith, they gain the courage to act again. So Gary Allen writes about that process and coming fourfold into socialism. And this is what he writes. If one understands that socialism is not a share the wealth program, but is in reality a method to consolidate and control the wealth, then the seemingly paradox of super rich men promoting socialism becomes no paradox at all. Instead, it becomes logical, even the perfect tool of power-seeking megalomaniacs. That's exactly what socialism is. Look at Breadline Bernie Sanders, all right? A devout socialist communist, all right? Socialism is just another step to complete control, which is communism. Breadline Bernie says white people don't know how to be poor. Breadline Bernie has $3 million houses. Breadline Bernie's main vehicle is worth $128,000. Breadline Bernie never had a job but ran for political office. Breadline Bernie was thrown out of his hippie commune, which we read the statement to you some months ago from the leader of that commune, because, quote unquote, he was too lazy to work. So what did he do? He became a politician. Folks, do you want to know the first socialist organization that was in this country? It was the Pilgrims, believe it or not. The Pilgrims, when they came to Plymouth in Massachusetts, their First year they suffered, but when the spring came, they set up a commune type of government. Well, guess what? It lasted one season. You know why? Because in that community of people, there were some breadline Bernies that wouldn't work, but expected to gather and take from the labors of the people who are actually working. And then Sam Bradford and others said, we're not doing this anymore. We're going to look out for each other, but everyone's going to have to work for their own begets. And that's what took place. And from there, they flourished. Socialism does not work, my friends. Communism does not work. And Mr. Allen is right. When you look at these communists, look at the Bolshevik Revolution. 12 of the 13 people of Lenin were from New York City. They were all financed from New York and London. Every communist revolution that has taken place since, every one of them, have been financed by the international bankers so they can consolidate the wealth and control it. And that's what it's all about. Okay. I know I showed these clips to you last week, but I want to do it again. I apologize for those to you that may be upset about that, but it just gets into exactly what we're speaking of. John Swinton, former editor of major New York papers. The business of this is again his retirement gala. The business of journalists is to destroy the truth, to lie outright, to pervert, to vilify, to fawn at the feet of mammon, and to sell his country and his race for his daily bread. We, the editors, the press, the media, are the tools and vassals of rich men behind the scenes. We are the jumping jacks, they pull the strings, and we dance. Our talents, our possibilities, and our lives are all the property of other men. We are intellectual prostitutes. Hasn't changed a bit, has it? Let us continue. This is from Malcolm X. The media is the most powerful entity on earth. They have the power to make the innocent guilty and to make the guilty innocent, and that's power because they control the minds of the masses. Absolutely true. Although we see a little bit of cracking in their fortification of control of information, and they're doing all they can to stop that process by controlling the internet. If my sons did not want wars, there would be none. Gertrude Schnapper, who is the wife of Maya Amschchild Rothschild, and that statement is true today. George Collins, they spend billions of dollars every year lobbying to get what they want. Well, we know what they want. They want more for themselves and less for everybody else. But I'll tell you what they don't want. They don't want a population of citizens capable of critical thinking. This is what they've taken away from us, my friends, through the indoctrination system, the dumbing down, through the fluoride in the water, through the vaccinations, through the chemtrails, the bariums, the aluminum dioxides that they're spraying on us. All of this, medically they're doing this. They don't want us to have critical thinking. Okay? So let me continue with this. They don't want a population of citizens capable of critical thinking. They don't want well-informed, well-educated people capable of critical thinking. They're not interested in that. That doesn't help them. That's against their interest. And here, George Collins again, here's a bumper sticker I'd like to see. We are the proud parents of a child who has resisted his teacher's attempts to break his spirit and bend him to the will of his corporate masters. Absolutely 100% correct. Okay, so I'm going to get into this Frankfurt school, and if you missed some of it, folks, there's a lot of history behind it. So, but I am going to just go right into their 12 criteria. I call them tenets to mold us to where they want to mold us to. Now, mind you, this is 1922. Okay. This is 1922. So let's go ahead and read this to you. Number one, the creation, now this is 1922, my friends. Number one, the creation of racism, offenses, and hate speech laws. That is all done, okay? See, because if you can control language, you are controlling thought Do you understand that? You're not only just putting limitations on language, you are controlling the thought process. Because what we speak is what we think. What we think is what we speak. So if you can control what we speak, you are controlling parameters of thinking. This is what they've done. Number two, continual change to create confusion, e.g. in school criteria, etc. Well, they've done that. They've done that completely. Common Core math doesn't work. We all know that doesn't work. They've done it through changing history. The average American thinks the Civil War was about freeing the black man. Had nothing to do with freeing the black man. That was the political guise to unite the northern people. Of course, who won the Civil War? You're going to say, oh, the North did. No, they didn't. The North didn't win the Civil War, my friends. Washington, D.C. won the Civil War through the expansion of federalism over the states' rights, because that's what the South was fighting about. Think about this. If you were a farmer, whatever, you're working in the South, would you have left your family, your farm? Would you have risked life and limb so that, depending who you read, between 4.5% and 6% of the rich people of the South could hold slaves? No, you wouldn't. But would you leave your family and farm and risk life and limb to protect the Constitution and the sovereignty of the states? Of course you would. That's the foundation of our republic. That's one small example of altering history. I'll give you another example. I'll take subject matters, my friends, and I'll just pick something out, and I will absolutely ingest all the information that I can get on it. Hitler. Hitler was this terrible, terrible guy. And he was. He did a lot of terrible, terrible things. But who financed Hitler? The bankers did. Brown Brothers Harriman Union Bank out of New York, and the London bankers out of the City of London. When Hitler had 1/3 of the German army where he could have eliminated them at Dunkirk, the Germans controlled the ground and they controlled the air, and 1/3 of the English army had their backs to the sea. Why didn't Hitler massacre them? Why did he send Rudolf Hess to do a nighttime parachute jump, and it was his first jump, talk about courage, into England to talk to the hierarchy of the English government and the king and queen? Because it wasn't in the plans. Why, my friends? Because when the same thing that happened to Lincoln happened to Hitler. When the bankers, oh, and by the way, who was the fund manager between the Brown Brothers Harriman Union Bank of New York and the Reich Bank of Germany? Prescott Bush, the father of George Herbert Walker Bush and the grandfather of George W. Think of that. So what happened? Why did they turn on Hitler? Well, because when they went up to Hitler and said, we're going to charge you between 16 and 18% interest, usury, on us printing your German marks, Hitler did the same. And in Lincoln's time, they were going to charge him 24%. And Lincoln said, no, I'm going to print greenbacks based on the faith of the United States government. But Lincoln took it a step further and said it was the only thing payable for taxes. Well, Hitler did the same thing. He started producing his own German marks. The bankers turned on Hitler. Folks, read Mein Kampf, My Struggle, written by Hitler. When he read it, when he wrote it, folks, then go and read the European Union documents and you'll see it's the same thing. Hitler wanted a European Union. It's the same thing. And it would have been carried out. The first the first countries that started bombing civilian populations between England and Germany. You're going to say, oh, it was Germany, them evil Germans. No, my friends, it was the English. And that's when Hitler started using the V-2 rockets on the civilian population in England. England was the first country to drop bombs on civilian populations in World War II. So again, continue change to create confusion. Common Core math doesn't work. History's been altered. Example of that. Number 3, masturbation propaganda in schools combined with homosexualization of children and their corruption by exposing them to child porn in the classroom. Folks, I could sit here and do 5 shows on this. You all know that's coming on. And look at the cost of education. Number 4, the systematic undermining of parental and teachers' authority. Hell, your children can get abortions without even talking to the parents about it. But in the schools, we can't give your child an aspirin without getting permission from the parents. Number 5, huge immigration to destroy national identity and foment future race wars. Done. That's all done in Western Europe. Eastern Europe, because they understand history, particularly Hungary and Poland and Romania, have stopped that process. You're not seeing their countries being destroyed. Now that process has come to the United States. Number 6, the systemic promotion of excessive drinking and recreational drugs. Can you say the 60s and 70s? Number 7, the systematic promotion of sexual deviance in society. Wow. That's everywhere, isn't it? We got people marrying dogs. We got people, I told you last week, this one person identified as a tree, legally married a tree. We have all these pedophiles that your tax dollars are paying for, indoctrinating children in public schools and public libraries. This is where all this comes from, my friends. This isn't just something that's taking place. This is all being implemented. And this is the modus operandi, and it was developed in 1922. Number 8, an unreliable legal system with bias against the victims of crime. We have read many of these to you. People being sued because the perpetrators on their property were injured. People who think they have property rights have no property rights, like the state of Vermont here, where someone can come on your property with or without your permission and do whatever they wish. And you'll wind up in court for it based on fabrication. The system also protects who? The just us system protects who? The people in the system. And you and I, my friends, are not in the system. Look at all of the corruption and everything that goes on, and nothing is being done in it by the legal system. Nothing. Because the system, look at Comey. I'm not going to get into it. I'm going on. Number 9, dependency on state benefits. 52% of Americans now are on some sort of state benefit. Number 10, controlling dumbing down of the media. Well, let me see. 96% of the world's media is controlled by 6 companies. Do you think they have control of the media? And folks, it's ironic when you think about the effect that the other 4%, known as the alternative media, is having to expose all this. That's just 4% of the available media. The other 96% is controlled by these very same entities. It's unbelievable. Number 11, encouraging the breakdown of the family. And I use the example of our welfare system here in the United States. If the mother, and father, live together, they can't get welfare benefits. They have to separate. There has to be no family unit for them to get welfare benefits. And have more children, mother, and we'll give you a pay raise every month. Just don't have the sperm donor under the same roof. In Russia, it's the other way. they have a welfare system. And if the mother and father do not live together to create a family unit, there is no welfare benefits applied. Number 11, an all-out attack on Christianity and the emptying of the churches. Absolutely true. They have taken over the churches. Now, I want to show you this. Again, I'm sorry. This is their emblem, which we've said to you last week. And this is Willie Munzenberg, who we're going to be speaking of. And I know I've said this before, but boy, when you look in this man's eyes, it's really, really incredible. And this is George Lakic, who we're going to be getting into also right now. So that's Willie Munzenberg, and this is George Lakic right here. My apologies, Bill, I jumped ahead. So I have to, for the sake of time, my friends, I'm going to go on, and I'm going to start right here. In 1933, a gentleman by the name of William Reich was an honored and adulated member of the Frankfurt School, wrote in the Mass Psychology of Fascism. Now, what is fascism, my friends? Fascism is corporatism. El Duce Mussolini summed it up the best. Fascism is corporatism. It's when government and corporations work in cahoots against the people. Now, in Germany, we had fascism during the Third Reich. But the difference was the state. They had a relationship with the corporations, but the state had a superior relationship over the corporations. Today, because the Federal Reserve, a private foreign for-profit banking corporation, controls the issuance of our currency, and all, like Google, you know, they walk right into the Congress and they lie, and they know they're being lied, no charges brought up. Because the corporations now have a superior position to the state. But it still is fascism. Okay, that the matriarchy was the only genuine family type of natural society. He was, as such, to be an inspiration to the feminists, because the feminist movement, my friends, was all implemented as part of breaking up the family. Bertrand Russell, the father of American education system today. You remember the quote we had from him? We did quite a bit on Bertrand Russell about how we are going to, the education system, which is going to become an indoctrination system, is going to be developed so that the student, at the end of his process of going through this system and graduating, would not be able to think in terms of critical thinking, but only as his schooled masters would have desired. Look what's coming out of academia today, my friends. Not only can these kids not count change back to you, they can't have critical thinking like George Collins was talking about. They've taken away our ability for critical thinking. We cannot look at a situation, assess it, and come to our own conclusions. You know, I used to teach basic and advanced emergency medicine, and one of the most difficult things for me to get through to young people was the art, the ability of critical thinking, because that whole process of reasoning has been taken away from them at a very high cost to you and I may add. Bertrand Russell was to join the Frankfurt School in their efforts at mass social engineering. He spilled the beans in 1951 book, The Impact of Science on Society. He wrote, "The social psychologists of the future will have a number of classes of school children on whom they will try different methods of producing an unshakable conviction that snow is black. Various results will soon be arrived at. First, that the influence of home is obstructive. Second, that not much can be done unless indoctrination begins before the age of 10. Why do you think we have all these early daycare centers? Why? Because they know the most important part, and Hitler wrote about this, the most important part to maneuver and indoctrinate children, my friends, is before the age of 10. So we have these early daycare. So, well, you say, well, both parents got to go out and work time. Well, of course they do, folks. 62% of your money, of your sweat equity, is going to taxes and fees and regulations and everything else for the government. Not to mention the decline of the purchasing power of your medium of exchange. So, of course, both parents have to work. Who's raising your children? Who are your children looking to for answers? Let us continue. Second, that not much can be done unless the indoctrination begins before the age of 10. Notice his word indoctrination. It's not education, my friends, it's indoctrination. Third, that the verses set to music and repeatedly intoned are very effective. What's he talking about? Everything is vibration and language. Everything vibrates. Everything is vibration, and the language in, this is why, they call it hip hop and rap. This is why it's so destructive to young people. It's not just the language about beating up hoes and killing cops. It's the vibrational methods that are used. Fourth, that the opinion that snow is white must be held to show a morbid taste for eccentricity. In other words, you're going to see that the snow is white, but because everybody else says it's black, you're not going to be able to rationalize, and you're going to accept that the snow is black because your critical thinking ability has been taken away and you're going along with the crowd. Like the emperor wears no clothes. Same thing. But I anticipate it is for future scientists to make these maxims precise and discover exactly how much it costs per head to make children believe that snow is black and how much less it would cost to make them believe it is dark gray. In other words, okay, the snow is white, but we're going to convince you it's not white. But okay, we're going to take it in steps. We're going to go from white to a dark grayish and then finally to it's black, the complete opposite. And we're going to do that with math. We're going to do it with history. We're going to do it with indoctrination. When the technique has been perfected, every government that has been in charge of education for a generation will be able to control its subjects. Its subjects securely without the need of armies or policemen. That takes us back exactly to the quote here that about from Joseph Comte de Maistre. Until now, nations were killed by conquest, that is by invasion. But here, an important question arises. Can a nation not die on its own soil without resettlement or invasion by allowing the flies of decomposition to corrupt to the very core those original and constituent principles which makes it what it is? Can we destroy its foundations through indoctrinations, my friends? They've done it at an extremely high cost to you and I, and that's what the education system in this country is today. It is to dumb you down, dumb our children down, take our children against the parents, to destroy the family structure, and have the allegiance to the government. That's where we are today, my friends. Okay, I'm going to go on. I'm going to skip some of this. Just because of the fact, for the sake of time. Okay. What we have to understand, let me stop here. And I was doing some research on the Bolshevik Revolution, okay? One of the first things that the Bolshevik Revolution did, besides the violence, my friends, was the destruction of the Christian churches. That was one of the very first things they did. Now, in Moscow alone, and this was written by the American Hebrew of 1918 and 1932. This is page 12. Okay? 15 years after the Bolshevist Revolution was launched to carry out the Marxist program, The editor of the American Hebrew wrote, according to information that this writer could secure, while in Russia a few weeks ago, not one Jewish synagogue has been torn down, as have hundreds, perhaps thousands of Greek, Catholic, and Christian churches. And in Moscow and other large cities, one can see Christian churches being burnt or in the process of destruction because it was claimed the government needed these locations for their large buildings. So we replaced buildings of Christianity and replaced them with buildings of bureaucracy and the government. So think of the symbolism of that, my friends. Think of the symbolism of that. This is what's going on today. Okay? It's exactly what's going on today. And it's what is not only going on in the churches, because through the Johnson Act, yeah, they haven't destroyed the buildings, but just like the Marxist culture of society, they did a cultural revolution in the churches by controlling the purse strings of the churches. And you may say, what am I speaking of? I'm talking about the Johnson Act. The Johnson Act was written by LBJ, one of the worst presidents ever to be in the Oval Office of the United States. He actually, one of his last acts in 1968 was to funnel military hardware through Russia to the NVA in Vietnam. Something like what happened in World War II, something like what happened in World War I, something like what happened in the Korean War. Think of that. So what they've done with the Johnson Act was they said, you want these tax breaks where you don't have to pay taxes. We are going to mandate that you, Mr. and Mrs. Pastors, are not going to speak to your parishioners about government policies, what's going on in the government, anything going on in the judicial, anything going on at all of the alphabet agencies that is going on within or about the government. Not allowed to talk about it. So, where is their allegiance? And this is what makes people like, say, Chuck Baldwin so vitally crucial that he is shut down by the government. This is why they've tried on 6 occasions that I can think of offhand to shut down Chuck Baldwin. Why? Because he pays the tax. You go on Chuck Baldwin's website and you will see a lot about what's going on in the government and how it's going against Christianity and the family unit. Why? Because he pays the tax. He's not a 501c3 IRS corporation like every other church. I use the word church very loosely in this country. So they don't control him through that mechanism. The church that you go to here in Vermont, I guarantee you, is a 501c3 IRS corporation. Oh, excuse me. Excuse me. There may be one here in Lyndonville that's not, and I won't say its name because I'm not certain of it. But knowing the leadership of that church, I'm pretty certain that they're not. So there may be one church here in Vermont, and I'm going to call this fine gentleman and I'm going to ask him, that is not under the effects of the IRS and the Johnson Act. But if you do not go to that one church in Lyndonville, Vermont, that maybe is not under that guy's. Every other church that I know of in the state of Vermont and throughout the country, I'd be willing to say that over 99% of all the churches in the United States are nothing more than government shows and shrills because they will not speak about what the government is. They won't speak what Jesus did with the money changers. In Old Hebrew to Greek, the word was money changers. When he flipped over their tables and he called them money changers and he whipped them. It was the only time Jesus showed anger in his 33 years on earth. Only time. But why won't your pastor talk about that? Because he can't, folks. Because his allegiance is to the money. That's where his allegiance is. It's to the money. It's to that tax break. He has sold his soul to the tax break. And it's the same way with the indoctrination process in our school, as Bertrand Russell spoke of. Snow is black. It'll cost a little less to make it snow is slightly gray. And it'll cost a little more to make it the snow is black. But hell, don't worry about it. We're going for snow is black because guess what? They're paying for it. You and I are paying for it. Folks, 92% of my property tax bill, and I have no children in the school system, goes to the school system, the indoctrination system. 92% of it. And it's thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars annually. And why is that? Because I do not own my property. Senate Document 43 tells me who owns my property. All property is in the state and subordinate to the necessities of the state. Senate Document 43. We have read this document to you upteen times. I understand why all of this is being laid against us, my friends. Because Trading with the Enemies Act of 1933, we have been declared the enemy of the United States government. I know that sounds crazy. I get it. Folks, when I first read that 25, 30 years ago, I had to send away for a book that back then cost me just under $100 to confirm that this was right. And then I had to write to the legislative page in the Congressional Record to confirm that this is right. Well, it's correct, my friends. The Trading with the Enemies Act was an adaptation from the 1917 Trading with the Enemies Act. And some of the language that they changed was definitions. And one of the definitions that they changed was the definition of enemy in the 1933 Trading with the Enemies Act. And the definition of enemy in the 1933 Trading with the Enemies Act is citizens of the United States or those under the jurisdiction of the United States. My friends, you and I have been declared the enemy of the United States government. That comes from the Congressional Record. That's not some makeup. That comes from the Congressional Record. That is law. Is it a wonder why they want your guns? Why they want to dissolve the family? Of course they want your guns. Because if the American people ever found out what's been taking place, what we've been paying for, how this has all been worked against us, how every alphabet agency of the government has been weaponized against us, how the school system has been weaponized against us and our children, and our relationship with our children. Might upset you a little bit. You might actually get off the couch. Hell, you might even write a letter to somebody. Why do you think on the Department of Homeland Security list, the #1 terrorist threat, well, excuse me, I'm going to have to look this up. As of 2 months ago, the #1 security risk, terrorist list in the United States was what? I've read it to you, I've showed it to you. Veterans. Now, DHS is upgrading that. What is it? White nationalist. More identity politics. And what does that create, my friends? It creates more division amongst the people. Divide and conquer. Divide and conquer. And they have done this on every aspect, every avenue that they can do it. They've done it with race, they've done it with gender, they've done it with economics. They've done it against children and parents, and it's all through the churches and this indoctrination system called the public school system that we pay an astronomical fee for. We, my friends, on every level of it, are financing our own demise. Every level of it, we're financing it. And because we're financing it, and because we use a medium of exchange, which is a script of a private for-profit banking corporation called the Federal Reserve Bank, we have to pay them an interest due on every bit of it because they gave us permission to print it in the first place, and it's nothing but ledgers. They've taken all the gold, they've taken all the silver, they've taken all the property, and now they're destroying the family unit, and the modus operandi for it comes from the Frankfurt School, and it was written in 1922. My friends, we are very thankful you take the time from your busy day to view our program. We always close in asking you to seek truth, to obtain knowledge, and to manifest kindness to your fellow man. And we always close in reminding you that your government is your responsibility. And we thank you for watching.
Got to read between the lines. Got to read between the lines. Well, the truth is very simple, very hard to find.